I always remember this Rocky Balboa movie, and that's one of my favorite quotes, right?
Yeah.
He's telling his son that, remember, the world is not fair. It's not about how hard you get hit and you fall down. It's how hard you get hit and how quickly you recover, get up again in the ring.
Right.
Cyber resilience is the same thing. You need to be more resilient rather than more secure. When you're getting into a role of an executive as a CISO for a company, learn the business which you are getting into it. Don't just come from a technical background, say that I used to be a pen tester. I straight away go as a CISO and start identifying all the vulnerability and give a 200-page report to the CIO and the CRO. Oh, go and fix it. You will be out of the company in no time.
Welcome to the Be Fearless podcast, Abbas.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here, Vivek.
So, Abbas, I've known you for a while. Right now, you're the Chief Security Advisor at Microsoft. I think we go back almost 16, 17 years. And we've also been very honored, lucky, and privileged to have you as an advisor to SquareX. So just to kick things off, can you tell us a little bit about, what you do right now, your current role, just so our audience understands the vantage point from your side?
Yeah. No, thank you for having me here. Yeah, it's been a while. We've been knowing each other for quite some time, as you said, almost since our time from Kingdom of Bahrain, when I used to work as a CISO for Electronic Government of Bahrain. But yeah, in my current role, I'm the Chief Cybersecurity Advisor or a Chief Security Advisor, as we say, for Microsoft Asia. As you know, I'm based in Melbourne, Australia, but I cover Asia region as a part of my role. More of a strategic advisor to our CISOs of our customer, where they can get the best value of Microsoft investment, what they're doing it, and if they need any advice in terms of how they should be create a strategy within the environment, leveraging the Microsoft technology. And I'm also evangelist with Microsoft, so I go and present in a lot of conferences and represent Microsoft as one of the top tier security vendor in the world.
Okay, amazing. Now, could go back all the way in time. I know you have a very non-traditional background from where you started. So if you could go back in time, very beginning of the journey, how did you get into cybersecurity? And then from there, how did you kind of go ahead, move up and, become CISOs in multiple, very iconic, great companies and then eventually at Microsoft?
Yeah. So my journey was very, I would say, very linear journey. I would say not a straight line. I did my degree in accounting and auditing. Although I studied computer science or computer as a subject in school when I was in high school, I think mine was one of the first school in Gujarat where they introduced the subject, and I got fascinated by learning some of the earlier language called GW Basic, which is of course Microsoft very first language, and MS-DOS, which really sparked the interest that I think this is something new, and I'm really curious in learning more about that. However, did not get opportunity to do any kind of a degree or engineering in the computer science. So I took a different route. I went to study Bachelor's of Commerce and Accounting and Auditing with the hope that I can go back to business of my father. But always had a spark of learning IT, and I told my dad that I want to study computer. And the only option was diploma. So during my college time, I started doing a diploma in system management, learned programming language like Java and C++ and VC++, but programming never stuck to my head. I was more of a hands-on person. So I ended up becoming a system administrator or a network administrator. I worked on things like Novel Network, AS400, Unix, Linux, Windows NT, Windows NT Enterprise. Those are the technologies I started my career with, managing those network for large companies, including firewall and whatnot. And from there, I sparked the interest of becoming into a security side, because one of the company where I was a system admin got hacked.
Okay.
And I was wondering, how things can go wrong? I'm so good in creating the network, but not good in protecting the network. So that started the spark into, okay, I think I need to study more. Just knowing all the operating systems like Novell and AS4 is not going to be enough. So then I did a self-study on how the hackers think and how they get hacked. And that's how I became the pen tester, looking at your security tube videos. That also helped me a lot in my early days where I was getting into more hands-on work. And from there, working in the consulting companies like KPMG and EY, I learned the governance, risk, compliance framework, and then got opportunity to become a CISO. I did the CISO gig for 15 years and migrated to Australia around 11 years back and got opportunity to work with Microsoft now. So all the way from accounting to system admin, network admin to pen tester, GRC, IT audit, and now as an advisor.
No, fascinating and very inspirational, because I know there are a lot of people who come from non-traditional, non-technical backgrounds. They always, worry and grapple with this whole idea that, hey, could we ever, get into something which is so technical like cybersecurity, become a CISO, kind of go up that chain. And I think for a lot of our viewers at this point in time, I mean, this serves as great inspiration. One of the things you left out, which is you've authored over a half a dozen books, probably moving towards a dozen books right now. Tell us what prompted you to become a book author? What were your different books about?
Yeah. So I always like doing the presentation, training. Those are the things I do it, but never thought I could write. But one of my friend who used to be with Microsoft, he has written more than 20 books. He reached out to me during the COVID time that I'm writing a book on threat hunting, and you are a technical person and would really love if you can write a couple of chapters or 3 chapters for me. I said, I have never written a book or a chapters. I can write blogs, which is fine, but not a book as such. I said, I'll guide you with the journey. So he became my mentor and coach me how to create the 30-page or 40-page chapter. And I really enjoyed the process, which got hooked into me. Sir, I said, I have so many other ideas because I like to read and I like to learn and do the training and certification. I said, I want to write my own book now. This is the book which we wrote, the first book, Threat Hunting in the Cloud, became a bestseller in the Amazon, sold hundreds and hundreds of copies. Then I said, I want to create my own legacy and write my own book. And that's how I started writing second book, and third book, and then fourth book. And now I'm writing the fifth one as well, going to start. But I don't write alone because if you write alone, I will never finish because of work pressure, this and that. You need always one partner who will push each other and bounce off the idea. So I always co-author with at least 1 or 2 people. So minimum 2, but maximum 3. So we can work together as a collaborative approach and continuing the journey. It's a good thing to have it as a profile of an individual,
And also, I'm sure, multiple author gives very interesting perspectives based upon their own experiences and all of that. One of the books which comes to my mind is the one on Zero Trust, where I know there was somebody very special who had written the foreword for the book as well, if I recall.
Backward and forward, yes.
So tell us a little bit about that.
As you know, Zero Trust concept was coined by somebody called Dr. Chase Cunningham. I think you already met him. So Dr. Chase is the one who coined that word when he was working with the Forrester. He came up with the concept. Although Zero Trust has been a while, but like Beyond Corp and many other organizations have been using that kind of a concept. But the word Zero Trust was coined by Dr. Zero Trust or Dr. Chase Cunningham, who used to work for Forrester. So when I was writing the book, I approached him that you are one of my inspiration because I took a training from Forrester and I became one of the first few Zero Trust strategists certified by Forrester. And he was the main trainer for that. So which inspired me. I said, I can do something more with that particular topic. And I reached out to him that I'm writing a book and I want to share what I have done. And he really liked the concept on things I have written in the book. I said, okay, I can be your endorser and a backward writer. So he wrote the backward for me and we took a lot of photos and did a lot of podcasts similar to this along with him.
Yeah, fantastic. And tell me, I know Zero Trust is one of those core pillars in the way, all enterprises, everybody likes to think about security. Since its inception, how has Zero Trust changed and what do you think is going to be the future of Zero Trust?
Zero Trust is all about the principles. It's not about the technology. We talk about the principles, and Zero Trust is a least privilege model. So whenever you have an environment and you have a number of users, make sure you are giving them access based on need to know, need to do basis, or just in time and just enough access. That's the number one principle of Zero Trust. Second principle we talk about is an assume breach. That means you should have a hacker's mindset that if one control fails, what I'm going to do it. With other means, defense in depth approach. So that's the second principle. The third principle we talk about in no particular order is never trust, always verify. Yeah. So these are all core principles which is going to be around for a while. It's not going to go away. You can add more principles like network segmentation and monitoring and whatnot. But end of the day, if you're following this core principle, apply that principle into your environment and you can say that I'm following the Zero Trust architecture framework. So principle is going to be same. Technology comes and goes.
Yeah. I mean, I remember back in the day, it was very difficult for a lot of CISOs to mouth the whole assumed breach scenario, right? Because you have to literally go to your organization and tell them, look, let's assume we are going to be hacked. Now let's figure out how to stop, further damage, lateral movement, and all of that.
Absolutely.
So over the years, have you seen that it's become easier for CISOs to convince their board, their CEOs, that this is something we should have as a hard swallow, and probably go ahead and just build defenses that way, or it's still the same?
No, absolutely. You're right. So these days, board are getting more and more tech savvy, or getting understanding cybersecurity is one of the top risk to the business. And as a matter of fact, if you look at World Economic Forum,
Right.
World Economic Forum talks about cybersecurity as a top 5 risk in the world, apart from natural disasters and calamities and pandemic, many other things. But they consider cybersecurity as a top 5 risk in the world, according to World Economic Forum. So it has become a boardroom discussion. CISO has no longer need to go and convince that, okay, I need support from you. They understand very well, and they are asking the questions in a way. At the same time, 100% security is a myth.
Yeah.
If anyone says, or any board member says, are we 100% secure? The answer is no. Nobody can guarantee that.
Yeah.
All the large companies in the world, you can see, they are being constantly targeted. Why? Attackers have gone smarter. They have gone advanced, and they have gone persistent.
Right.
You are not fighting against an individual, you're fighting against the nation.
Yeah.
There are 330 plus nation state sponsored actors who are targeting organizations, and they are advanced and persistent. That's why we call it APT, advanced persistent threat. And they're really, really persistent. That's why I'm reiterating persistent.
Correct.
If somebody is that persistent, they're going to get you. So there is nothing called 100%, and that's why they have to think assume breach, that if it's not if, it's when. So you need to be ready. You don't need to be 100% secure, but what the concept I talk about is you need to be more resilient.
Makes sense.
And it's not about how hard you're going to get hit. And I always remember this Rocky Balboa movie, and that's one of my favorite quotes, right? He's telling his son that, remember, the world is not fair. It's not about how hard you get hit and you fall down. It's how hard you get hit and how quickly you recover, get up again in the ring.
Right.
Cyber resilience is the same thing. You need to be more resilient rather than more secure. You can never be enough security in your environment.
Right.
But if something happens to your environment, how quickly you are going to recover from that attack is what we need to educate and continuously inform our board member, that our mean time to detect and mean time to recovery is slowly reducing. We are able to recover faster.
Yeah.
And we exactly know what's happening in our environment. That's the concept now board is able to understand. That's the job of a CISO, to educate the board that we are more resilient than before, than last week or than last year. No?
Right.
That's the whole concept.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, the attacker only has to win once, while the defender has to win every single time.
Absolutely.
And to your point, by game theory over a very long period, sadly, mathematically, the attacker will win.
Yes.
And that's why it's all about resilience rather than having that eventual goal that we'll be 100% secure.
Yeah. Nobody can guarantee that.
And that's really where segueing to, Gen AI, everybody's talking about it. Of course, I don't want to give you the same cliche questions.
Yeah.
But now with generative AI and everything coming in, like, how do you think, let's say, the principles of zero trust can be applied to this new technology, and what is the advice that you typically give, and what are you seeing in the field? What are the concerns most people have?
See, of course, Gen AI has been, or AI has been around since 1962, 1961. Yeah. It's not something new. But all of a sudden, after OpenAI coming up with the ChatGPT, people became curious. If you look at Facebook and Twitter and mobile phone, it took years to get into a mainstream. Right. While a Gen AI, within 2 months, it has reached a couple of million users. Yeah. The only reason it reached is because of the curiosity. If everyone wanted to try it. But nobody invested time in assessing that thing properly. Yeah. That, okay, yes, Gen AI is available, but what are the risks it can bring to your environment? Are you ready for adoption? Just not take Gen AI-based application or product in your company because everyone is talking about it. So the first thing it goes about is your data security. So again, is one of the core pillar of zero trust architecture is about application, data, network, user identity. Data is the main thing, right? Data is a new jewel. Data is a new crown. Data is a new oil. At the end of the day, you have to protect your data. So I always go back to the CISO that, okay, you want to try Gen AI, but do you have a foundation layer working correctly before you go and try Gen AI in your environment, which goes to your data? Have you secured your data? Do you know where your data is? Have you classified your data?
Makes sense,
And because once you enable product like Copilot for 365 or any kind of Gen AI, it will go and look up your data and it will create the index and it will give you output, whatever you ask. What is my CEO salary?
Right.
It will go in and give it to you unless you have secured your SharePoint or unless you have secured your data, which nobody can access it based on the need to know, need to do basis.
Right.
Goes back to the zero trust principle.
Makes sense.
Of least privilege, right?
Yeah.
It is all circle. So yes, zero trust will apply to that, but you need to do a foundation layer of things, how GenAI can help you, having the right policies in place, having the right education in place. CISO asked me that I'm going to stop all the GenAI based application in my environment. A user will go home and try it. They can install a ChatGPT app on the phone and try it out.
Correct.
Only thing what they can do it better is go and give them a right prompt engineering training.
Exactly.
Teach them what to ask and how to ask, and give them a guidance what not to ask,
Right.
what files not to upload on them, because you don't control the outcome of open source product like such as ChatGPT. There are better enterprise version which they can leverage it, right?
Yeah. No, that's a great point. I mean, reminds me of when IoT was starting to come on the scene. And I still remember the early TVs, which even people were installing in their office premises, started having cameras and microphone. And I remember a lot of, CISOs would say, I'm never going to buy a TV, with like a camera and a microphone, right? 2 years forward, I think every TV has a camera and a microphone. So to your point, I think rather than blocking adoption of bleeding edge technology, which is anyway going to change, fundamental ways in which we work and, play, I think it's very important to kind of brace that very early on and, to your point, start to understand the intricacies of how to deploy it.
Absolutely.
So alongside with that, Abbas, what are the other threats that you typically see in a very recurring way, that most organizations are, concerned about, or typically attackers tend to succeed with?
Yeah. So number one technique which attackers are using these days is an identity-based attack.
Okay.
You look at the market, you look at the news, last 4 or 5 big breach, what you see, you can come up with a pattern that most of those attacks happen because of an identity. Adoption of multi-factor authentication is still very low.
Right.
Around the world. And attackers are leveraging all the breach compromise which happened in the wild. They collect all the passwords from the internet. They create a list of the password and they use a technique called password spray.
Okay.
No, it's not a brute force, it's a password spray. Brute force, you get locked down if you try to attempt 2 or 5 password. Password spray, they use the same password against all the identities in your environment. And if your end user is using one of those compromised password, end of the game. And one of the main thing you can do to protect against that is having an MFA. If you don't have an MFA, you are in a very bad situation, because all these attacks are identity-based attack, token theft attack, password spray attack. So number one threat today, the advanced persistent threats and nation-state actors are leveraging is coming through a identity-based attack. Second technique which they use it or they try to abuse is 2 things. One is insecure APIs.
Okay.
Third thing they try to use it is insecure configuration which are hosted on a publicly domain. Your VMs, your network firewall, your VPN infrastructure, which are on a publicly facing and you're not patching it correctly. And the fourth thing, which is one of the most important thing, which is where you are working on that and we are touching that and we can talk more on that, is client-side attack.
Yeah.
These kind of latest XDRs and technology are not able to detect the client-side attack which comes through browser, which is where the gap we see in the market, where end users are opening all the kind of file. You block them on your email. They want to open it, they forward it to a Gmail and they open it.
Yeah.
It's curious. Instant gratification, instant verification, they want it. And they're creating the risk in the environment.
Right. No, you bring up a very good point, and that is really where in recent times with hybrid work and all of that. And honestly, I can almost bet that if you go and take a look at a laptop of any corporate employee, apart from all the company tabs, there's going to be their personal Gmail, probably social media, depending upon how lenient the company is, and all of that. And when you're mixing all of these, various environments, then to your point, there is massive threat. And just to double click on that, at this point in time, I guess employees spend 90% of their time on their web browsers.
Absolutely.
Right? And that is really where attackers have also figured out that employees have keys to the kingdom. Everybody has access to data. To your point, if somebody steals the identity of, one of the employees working in the data team, there is a very high probability that they will have access to a lot of sensitive data.
True.
So, when it comes to browser security, like your thoughts on it, how critical do you think this is kind of going to be, moving forward in the future, given EDR systems and all of that have no visibility into it?
Yeah. See, there are concepts like ZTNA, Zero Trust Network Architecture, apart from that. There are concepts like SASE, Secure Edge Service Access. They are taking certain risk, or they provide a little bit of security in that space, but I won't say they cover many of these areas, which you touched upon, right? For example, personally itself, I use two browsers. I have a Microsoft Edge and I have a Chrome. I use Chrome for all my personal Gmail, Facebook open, all my company stuff, because Edge is owned by Microsoft. So I try to use Edge because it is a built-in capability of Copilot and whatnot, and I can do a Bing chat and all these kind of feature.
Right.
I personally use two browsers.
Yeah.
And if I have to look at something personally, I don't want my company to track, I go to the in private mode as well.
Yeah.
So even though I'm a practitioner, I follow that. And
of course,
it's general.
everybody does.
You ask everyone, they all will do, especially if they're using a managed device provided by company.
Correct.
You can't have two devices on your desk for checking your personal Gmail account as well as checking your online thing. And as you said correctly, it brings a risk as well. Things I receive on my personal or my company Outlook, they are protected. They have a built-in technology. It could detect, it could block as well. There are things like Safe Link available in the Microsoft Defender portfolio. If the link is risky, it will block at a browser level. But what if the same thing has been sent, which happens? Many times I receive the same email on two places, my Outlook company plus my Gmail as well, because
the attackers are targeting.
Or the marketing people who has my account for a while, and if I go to sites like Have I Been Pawn, I can see how many times my accounts have been breached. So they target me both the way. It may be blocked here, but I'm not always checking my company email, but I'm always checking my Gmail.
Yeah.
I would click on that first, then I go there. Sometimes I get curious why it's not opening here. I have it there. Let me open it from there, which brings a risk.
Yeah.
So definitely browser is something which 100% of the time it's open. Nobody closes the browser personally unless they shut down the laptop, right? Which brings a lot of risk as well. All the malicious links are been sent. Some macro enabled file has been sent to me. And I can't even, and my SIM can't even detect that. Okay, which file I open, what the attack path, how many people have received it.
Right.
Or even if I have to hunt it, then I have to create my own query in my SIM.
Correct.
And go and ask the maybe Copilot for security, or go and look up in my SIM and with a query that how many people have received this malicious file.
Right.
But I can't confirm whether how many people have clicked and opened it.
Yeah.
So there are lots of gap in terms of visibility. As we say, right? If you can't measure, you can't manage. If you can't see it, you have a blind spot. So there are some very niche blind spot which people are not aware. And I believe when I saw the demo which you showed me on your SquareX, I think, I know this pain area, and I'm glad that somebody is thinking from an attacker mindset. Or I knew you come from a pure hacking background, running the Pentester Academy for many years. You can think like an hacker.
Correct.
That's what the beauty. I think I got hooked into your product because of that. I said, okay, I would love to see more, and personally install all the plugins on my browser. So every time I get it, I go open a safe browser option in your plugin. And look at that file, and I find a lot of interesting issues in that on the personal version.
And to your point, I mean, that is exactly how we chanced upon the idea itself of SquareX. Is in Pentester Academy, when I was working with a lot of red teams, primarily they would come back with requests and basically say, hey, how do you think we could show that, we could compromise something in, our systems? How would attackers work? And I looked at it and I said, look, safe browsing in the enterprise, at this point, you only have these secure web gateways as part of SASE, SSE, as you mentioned. And unfortunately, the SSL intercepting proxy came like a decade back.
True.
With the URL as the core construct on which every trust is built.
Absolutely.
Now, the best example, we were discussing the attack which recently happened, where an organization would have whitelisted github.com. But now any attacker can go create a repository, zip up a piece of malware or ransomware, and now when somebody tries to download, looks like it is coming from GitHub or one of these very well-known sites where people collaborate, and unfortunately making it impossible for existing solutions to go ahead and detect and block it. So what we realized at that point is the browser is the place where you have access to the most rich metrics, where user interaction is happening, where you fully understand the user workflow, And hence makes sense that is the right place for us to create a security product residing entirely in the browser.
Yeah.
And at that point in time, we said, look, would not make sense for us to create our own browser. That's never worked.
Yeah.
I mean, Brave tried that in the consumer space. 40 million is good, but compared to the size of the internet, nowhere. So we said, hey, we needed something which could be deployed on any browser. And the only thing that can be done in that way is a browser extension.
Yeah.
So one thing led to the other, and that is really where SquareX is born, and we were very privileged to have you as an advisor as well.
My pleasure.
And I know you touched upon it very briefly. So what else did you like about SquareX, the team, and everything? Where you have so much confidence and belief in us. Which
No. Yeah. The main point goes is your background. I mean that's the main thing, right? It's always behind the person who thinks that way. Looking at your background, and since I know you for last more than 15 years, I know when you touch something, it must be a very unique problem you are trying to solve it, and the kind of team you have, all the IITs, interns and graduate in your environment, in your team, who are young, dynamic, freshers, as well as coming with all the latest ideas and leveraging AI and ML in your product is something very unique. And some of the name like Copilot, you need to give me extra on that, leveraging a lot of branding, including Be Fearless. and you being Microsoft RD, you have a whole right to leverage that. But yeah, jokes apart, absolutely the product, what I've seen so far, it's coming really well. Mm-hmm. I believe in that, the concept which you're creating. I think it's helping. It's going to help a lot of customers, a lot of organization in tapping the blind spot, which they may not be even aware of it.
Correct.
Or they know it, but they can't do it. It's more about the awareness. And now I think you are on the right path. One more point I forgot to mention. You talk about various threats. We are seeing it. The way we are trying to use Gen AI product as a consumer or in our environment, attackers are also leveraging the same thing.
That's a very good point.
They are equally advanced in leveraging this kind of new technology to target customers, creating the script, creating the automation of vulnerability identification, creating the malicious phishing email, near perfect email on that.
Yeah.
Something like prompt engineering, or the way we say prompt engineering as a normal user, they are using something called prompt injection. The way we have SQL injection on web, they are doing the prompt injection. So this is something which I wanted to actually ask you that question for a while, that can you detect if anyone is using a chat GPT or maybe a Copilot? Of course, Copilot has the feature of detecting the malicious prompt, but many of them are leveraging open source where they may not have the control to detect malicious prompt. End user is trying either internal malicious prompt, or the attacker is using a technique for injecting the prompt in their browser to target their LLM model. Is this something you are thinking of detecting in your product as well?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, I mean...
I know, I'm flipping the question. I've understood.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah.
And breaking it up into two parts. One is, of course, attackers probably somehow managing to inject a malicious JavaScript on a page where there is an Gen AI app. And that is really where, given that we are a full-blown browser security platform, it is possible to go ahead and deploy rules and policies to detect all of these injections from third-party sources and block it and kind of nip it in the bud. The second part is from an employee perspective. It's a web DLP use case where employees may inadvertently, or sometimes for what it's worth, in a malicious way, go ahead and upload enterprise content, documents, copy-paste information and all of that into many of these Gen AI tools and utilities. Yeah. And honestly, even on third-party sites like GitHub, Pastebin and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
And that is really where, because we reside in the browser, it is possible for enterprises to go ahead and deploy very fine-grained rules and policies, which will end up, looking at these files right from very basic regular expressions to document similarities and all of that, and having the ability to block such uploads and reporting it back to the administrator.
Yeah.
I can tell you there was one very interesting use case a prospective customer came up with, where they said, hey, we want our support people to have access to our CRM, but when they copy something from there, you should only allow a paste into enterprise-approved whitelisted websites and not to any other third-party website.
Wow.
So these are all examples which we figured were very, very important use cases, and we've solved for all of this.
Awesome. I think that you touched upon some of the very great use cases. Yeah.
And so Abbas, to kind of like segue, I think, as you said, like your very unconventional background and kind of meteoric rise to being the CISO of, such very, very well-known organizations, and now, of course, such a pivotal role. What advice would you give people, who are aspiring to be CISOs, who are aspiring to kind of follow footsteps of what you've done?
Yeah. So this, in the current time, CISOs come from various background. Yes, there was a time, I would say, during my time, most of the CISOs come from very technical, hands-on background, because at that time there was nothing called security. Everything was IT. So if you look at them, either they would be a developer or a system admin or a pen tester or come from GRC, and then they became a executive or a CISO role. But today, people come from various background. Even if you are working you're a psychologist, you can get into the CISO role. I've seen people coming from military and defense with a good experience on the combat. They get into a leadership skills and become a CISO. So CISO is not one such persona which people are targeting. CISO is a leadership role. CISO is a strategic role. CISO could be a technical role. CISO could be a people management role as well.
Yeah.
So it comes from various background. But one thing always I tell them, if you are getting into a new role as a CISO in a new company, always understand the business. One of the biggest mistake I have done in my life when I was in the early stage of my CISO role is not working with the people from the various segment.
Makes sense.
So when you're getting into a role of an executive as a CISO for a company, learn the business which you are getting into it. Don't just come from a technical background, say that I used to be a pen tester. I straight away go as a CISO and start identifying all the vulnerability and give a 200-page report to the CIO and the CRO. Oh, go and fix it. You will be out of the company in no time.
Yeah.
Understand the business and then try to translate all the things you find out as a CISO in the company into the language which they would understand. So when you're talking to the business people, make them understand the business risk of something is missing in your IT or a control environment. Don't just tell them that, I want a new SIM. Yeah. What problem are you going to solve by having a new SIM in your environment to run a SOC? So translate it into a business language which they can understand, speak the language which they would understand, translate it into a business risk, and that's how you'll be able to succeed in your role as a CISO. So not just technical background, but you need to understand the business as well.
Yeah, no, I think you bring up a very good point is the CISO should not look like an internal adversary.
Yes.
Right, where, all business folks are up in arms and saying that this gentleman is now starting to meddle and mess with, our workflows and this is going to impact business, right? Because most people still look at security more as an insurance policy, things not going bad. And you don't definitely want the person who's the custodian of their insurance to tell you how to drive. True. So that's a very good point. And from there, have you seen like a massive variation in the way CISOs may think about problems and solutions and all of that? Southeast Asia versus the US or other developed markets? Or do you see now that's starting to become very normalized and uniform?
There is a huge trend on privacy these days. Look at the countries like India. They come up with a new PDPA, Privacy Personal Data Assurance PDPA Act, especially focusing on the private data, personal data. Similarly, Bangkok has a DPDP, India DPDP, Bangkok PDPA, Australia, the Privacy Act, and many. So a lot of focus on compliance. And when you talk about the compliance, at the end of the day, again, goes back to the data.
Yeah.
So there is a trend now, or I would say most of the CISOs are concerned is about privacy and a compliance of the data, what they own, how long they're keeping the data, what data they have, who is the owner of the data, what classification you have. And on top of it, we have this Gen AI coming up everywhere, which again goes back to the data. So, everything is now rotating around the data. What you're trying to protect is the data estate at the end of the day. And these days, because of the globalization, I would say Googleization and the data, everyone is creating trillions of GBs of data on a couple of years time frame, right? And how long you need to keep the data. And if you look at the log as well, trillions of signals and the logs people are generating.
Right.
So everything is translated to the logs and the data and metadata and whatnot. So CISO has really now focusing on, end of the day, I need to protect the data of my company,
Right.
my customer data, my employee data, my private data. And if something goes wrong, they are now even bound to report it as well. US, they have SEC 8K. In Australia, they have to report it within few hours according to the APRA CPS 234 requirement. And many countries are coming up that how quickly you have to inform the right regulatory bodies if you are being targeted or the breach.
Okay.
So CISO role is really getting important these days, making sure they have the right control framework in place, they are reviewing it, they are assessing it, they are testing it, and anything new disruptive technology like Gen AI being targeted, what is the impact to the current strategy which they are building upon it.
Right.
So really the focus is coming at the end of the day to privacy and the compliance part of the data.
Fantastic. And just to build on that, I know, both of us were at the RSA conference. Any interesting trends that you saw, across like various booths or sessions beyond like what we discussed? Anything interesting?
I know RSA conference every year they come up with some new theme, and this year, by no surprise, AI.
Yeah.
Every vendor, every booth you go, AI enable this, AI power this, we solve this, we have this AI on that. So that's a buzzword or the talk of the town these days. All the big vendors are focusing on leveraging this technology within their product, which is good because attackers are already leveraging this to target because they have a speed on their side. So as a defender, if you are not using these kind of things, you are a bit slower than the attacker.
Right.
At the end of the day, we say that it's less than 72 minutes attacker takes to come inside your network and get out. So if your mean time to detect, mean time to respond is not less than half an hour, less than 20 minutes, you are losing the game. And that is where defenders have to leverage these kind of Gen AI based technology. For example, creating the policy, which I've seen fantastic demo in your product that if I have to write a simple policy in my firewall or in my environment, I need to scratch my head, I need to take help from a senior analyst and get it reviewed whether the policy will work. I have to try it out in my demo environment. If it works, then I will go and change approval and go and apply it. By that time, the game is over.
Absolutely.
So now people have to leverage this kind of technology like Gen AI, how I can quickly write in the Copilot, as you said, create this policy or write me a policy to block all the Southeast Asia or whatever notorious country you want to block from that. And it creates the script for you or create the policy for you. Now you go and simply apply.
Right.
Within seconds, you apply the policy and you block the threat in your environment.
Yes.
Rather than doing the change control and creating the policy.
Yeah.
So yes, that's a theme, and we have to leverage these kind of things in our product and portfolio so that your defenders are much more faster, and you're not dependent on hiring a very super smart technical person, level 2, level 3 in your SOC. Even a junior analyst who has just freshened up, passed from the college, you give them this kind of technology, and they can simply write in English.
Absolutely.
Write me a policy.
Absolutely.
Job done. So that's where we are solving the problem using this kind of technology.
Absolutely. No, I think you brought up a very good point. And, last 20 years in the industry, what I've also seen is attacks are getting very, very specific, which means your policies have to get very, very specific.
Fine-grained. Yeah.
Very fine-grained. And that is really where a lot of defenders, unfortunately, you can't put the onus on them to learn a product, to learn every single parameter, to be able to write efficient rule scripts and whatnot. Instead, the interface should be such that you're literally giving a human prompt and a queue, and the product is smart enough to go ahead and build on all of that, which is really what we've tried to solve as well. Fantastic discussion. Just to close out, very last question would be, if you go back in time, and of course, would you have done anything different when it comes to your career path? Anything comes to mind?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I covered a little bit in my talk about that, is not focusing on the business side of it. I come from a technical background, pen testing and network and system admin. I thought, okay, I'm the smartest person in the room.
Right.
I go as a CISO in the company and I will disrupt everything and say, your environment is bad. Here are the 40 things you need to fix it. Immediately you are being fired.
Yes.
And I have been fired. In my very first role as a CISO, I was asked to go, sorry, you didn't fit in the culture of the company. That's not we expected from a CISO. Yeah. And it was a wake-up call for me. What did I miss out? Then I went for a mentoring. I spoke to some senior CISO and said, what did I do wrong? And they said, you did not create your ally network. You did not understand the business, what they are into it. Have you go and spoken to every business head of the company? What is their pain area? How can you work with them to make their job successful, rather than you showing your muscle that I am the smartest person in the room? I think one advice I always give it to anyone who is working in cybersecurity is, yes, learn the technology. That's your bread and butter. You need to know how things operate and work and being configured. And if you come from that background, but ignoring the business people, not creating your allies in their environment, not talking to the various process owner, understanding what they do, how they do, and how you can help them in becoming a successful, then you will be failing in your role. So always work and understand the business, the company you're going through. That's the biggest thing. First, they said there is a plan for first 90 days. There is a checklist available as well on internet, and many other books are available. What are the first 90 days looks like? Your entire career in that company depends upon the first 90 days or first 100 days you spend in that job. What are you going to do in that first 100 days? There's a clear guideline available by multiple thought leader who has created that. If you follow that, then you have a good, successful career in that company. Otherwise, within the first 90 days, you know you are at the wrong place. Either you know it or they know it. So it's up to you.
No, that is excellent advice. And I totally agree with you. Something, I am realizing, of course, as now I go to CISOs and speak about their problems, I've realized it's very important to first understand what's on their priority list, then what's on the roadmap. And then, once in a while, a new attack will crop up, which will kind of go on the priority pile. But without that understanding and just talking in a silo about what we have to offer clearly doesn't work. So, fantastic. Thank you so much, Abbas, for taking the time to do this. We really appreciate it. All the best, and look forward to having you on the show once again.
My pleasure. And thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.